facility, we had a monkey that was being that was used as a surrogate mom, and it turns out that the investigator whom I had actually done a little research with actually needed to use an animal for one of his experiments, but he didn't want to use this monkey whom we all knew was Martha. And so we actually wound up, and so we really didn't know what to do with Martha, because the investigator really, investigators form attachments with animals. I think that's one of the one of the things we don't do a good enough job is in educating the general public, is that people who work with animals care about animals, and in particularly the investigators. People, a lot of the general public, if they just listen to the animal rights organizations, think that there's a lot of investigators walking around in white lab coats and are bereft of any kind of feelings whatsoever, and that's just not the case. And that was the case in this particular case here. There was a desire not to use Martha, the surrogate mother, for many years in an experiment. So instead, there was a desire to transfer her to another institution. And we actually looked at some sanctuaries, and at this time, I'm not at the high level, so I don't know everything that's going on, but it was my understanding that we weren't comfortable with the veterinary care at these sanctuaries. It wasn't a full-time vet, for instance, at this primate sanctuary. So there was a reluctance to actually have her go there. So in any case, Martha winds up going to the University of Washington. And so they go up there, and then 2 weeks later, Martha's used in the tissue banking program. So she was actually euthanized, and different parts of her were used for the different research projects there. Well, prior to her being taken to University of Washington, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the Animal Rights Group, got wind of us trying to find a place for her, and they wanted us to send her to the sanctuary, and that's why we did some of that research. So anyway, she winds up going to University of Washington. She's euthanized for the tissue banking, and then all of a sudden it's front page news, and there's this gal who is in front of the television cameras, and she has tears in her eyes about how this monkey was shipped off to another institution only to be killed and used in experiments, and why didn't we send the monkey to a sanctuary. And so she's on television, and she's tearing up, and she refers to Martha as Mary, has no idea what her name is. And so people who are looking at this story are thinking, wow, here's this really caring animal rights person, and wanting to save this animal, and looking at this and going, this person doesn't even know this animal, has never met this animal, doesn't have a relationship with this animal. We have a relationship with this animal. We're the ones who have been looking for a place for her. And I'm thinking, this general public is not getting an accurate representation at all of this entire story. So I learned really on, amongst all this other activity that's going on, how important it is to communicate what we're doing to the general public, and for us to be the voice of explaining to the general public of what we do and why we do it. And so that was very hard to watch and see some of the articles that were written that just did not understand the whole story. So that had a big impact on me.
And during your tenure at the University of Oregon, have there been either policy changes made to ensure that the communication is more direct, as you suggested, to the general public, or has it remained more reactive to situations because of political perils of talking about these issues publicly?
I'd say in general we're much more proactive. I think that soon after the break-in, the Vice President for Research created a crisis management team. In fact, we were probably one of the very first institutions to develop a crisis management team back in 1990. And so as part of that team, we had representatives from not only different players within the university, but also outside the university in terms of the local police. And so our efforts, we knew early on, as well as our relationships with the Oregon Biomedical Research Association, which was one of the early state organizations. You probably know Jim Parker was. That was another big influence. Was Jim Parker? He really ran that whole organization from Portland, there from the Primate Center there, and just a wonderful man. But learning early on the importance of getting the message out, being more proactive. And I think in when we're more proactive, when we're out there communicating with the general public, and you actually bring them into the facility and you show them what's going on, and they start to appreciate all the rules and the regulations that surround the use of animals in research, and then they appreciate the amount of care that's given to these animals and the people who care for them. Then they walk away usually with a completely different perspective from what they entered into. And I find that the case almost all the time. So do I think we do enough of being proactive? I don't. I think we need to do a lot more. There's always some sort of reticence that, well, geez, if things aren't, if things are okay and let's not rock the boat, there is still that fear, and that's one of the sort of lingering impacts of being really violated when there's something like a break-in, that people remember that. And the other aspect of the break-in was that some of the animals that they took were released into the wild, like New Zealand white rabbits that would have been raised for polyclonal antibody production. And the red-tailed hawks had a field day, and so how ethical is that? It's one thing to have an opinion about not using animals in research, regardless of what your beliefs are, but it's another thing to actually take those animals and then thinking that you're doing something beneficial by freeing them and putting in an environment that's completely foreign, only to be, attacked and killed very inhumanely. So.